You're listening to the Sass podcast. I'm your host, Christie Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. Welcome to the show. I am coming to you solo today. I've had a lot on my mind, and I keep trying to figure out how to express myself over on social media, and I sort of forget that I have this podcast that I can also use as a form of self-expression. I think that my mind compartmentalizes things like that. Social media is for, expression, and podcast is for information. And I need to start bridging that gap. I also will be completely straight up and tell you that even though it doesn't make much sense, the way I'm feeling over the last 2 weeks, which I will get into in this episode, it actually felt easier for me to write and record a solo episode than edit an interview. And when I say edit, I mean I have my uncle who technically edits the shows, but I listen to it, I mark the edits, I take notes of all the quotes, and I take notes of what we talk about, and it can actually be a pretty tedious process. So here I am writing and recording an episode from scratch because my brain just is doing everything it can to function. So anyway, what I thought I would talk about today is what's been going on. All right. So if you're listening in real time, it's June 2022, and my mental health has been steadily on track for the last few months, with the exception, of course, as you know, if you've listened to the show, I get a periodic downtick in my mood around that week before my period. And, the last 2 weeks, which are not that week, have been more challenging than they've been for me in a long time. And I've been trying to figure out why, and I'm going to try to work it out with you now. So for starters, again, if you've listened, you know that I joked a lot before on the show that sometimes I just get so fed up and tired of doing all the things that I need to do to keep my mental health steadily on track. Water, walk, nourish, sleep, create, connect, meditate, repeat. It's a lot. And, that all being said, I'm coming off of about 2.5 months of steadily doing those things every day. And it really didn't feel so taxing. It was really making them a part of my routine, combined with the weather getting warmer, the sun shining. My podcast felt like I was managing the schedule. We got both kids in school a couple days a week. Our social calendar was a nice mix of outings and nights in, and then something happened. And it's like something happened sounds like an actual just like one-time event, but it's not. I think that, no joke, the weather in New Jersey this summer has been less than ideal. And as I write this, it is another dark, gloomy, rainy, muggy day. And I'm not saying I want a heat wave, but it definitely doesn't feel like summer. And the lack of consistent sun is having a major impact on my mood. Like, for real, no doubt. Because today, as I'm recording this, it is sunny and I'm feeling a little better. Like, truly feeling a little bit better. And the other thing that I think is happening, and I'm sure I will listen to this, however long from now and understand it better, but I was thinking about this today. Where I was with my mental health, a year ago, during high times of anxiety or depression, I didn't have as many tools for coping. I didn't have as much self-awareness to know when it was coming on and what to do once it did hit. And I kind of feel like now I got into this rhythm of incorporating a lot of the things like the water and the walking and the nourishing and all those things that because I was doing those things, I kind of didn't recognize it coming on as much. Does that make sense? I'm asking you. Like, I feel like I just got in a good groove, started doing all those things really consistently, and then it almost feels like I just was like, okay, great. I'm in the routine. I'm doing all the things. And I feel as though perhaps I subconsciously allowed that to be a way for me to stop checking in. It was like, okay, I'm checking all the boxes, but I'm not actually checking in. And the next thing is that once I started to actually realize that it, quote unquote, was coming on again, just high levels of anxiety and mild depression, I would say. I didn't take the time that I needed to reset. And part of that is that our weekends have been very busy. We've had a couple of road trips, and it's like, so my kids, I mentioned, are in school 2 days a week. And one of those 2 kid-free days a week with these road trips was spent almost entirely packing, last-minute Target runs, loading the car, and actually picking up the kids early so that we could get on the road. And, like I said, I get 2 kid-free days a week. And while I really was able to talk myself through just how wonderful it was to be able to laundry pack, buy, and load the car without kids under my feet, I also was sacrificing the time that I usually spend taking care of myself. So, yes, I really worked hard at shifting my mindset on, hey, this is normally a day where I work and I exercise and I, make some nice meals for myself. But instead, I'm buying, packing, and loading. And oh my gosh, isn't it so nice to do this without the kids around? So, anyway. Today is one of those kid-free days, and I really made the intentional decision to prioritize what I need before packing because we're going to go away this weekend. And when I say go away, like we go down the Jersey Shore, and we've had another couple of road trips sprinkled in that aren't as easy as going down the Jersey Shore. But, I just decided I need to prioritize these things today. And these things for me are, the water, the walking, the working. And I won't lie, I watched 2 episodes of Housewives. I needed it. And I had a popsicle at like 11 a.m. And, I need that down and out time. I need that quiet time. And I haven't been getting a lot of that recently. So the other thing that I think is contributing to this mood situation is that I've started to feel a little stagnant with the growth of the podcast. I'm managing the production schedule, and things like downloads, followers, and connections are steadily increasing. I'm really craving that punch, that boom, that next level, and it's hard, right? So anyway, in this desire mode, I had a marketing meeting with all very well-intentioned people who love me, but the meeting went south. I felt misunderstood, stuck, uninspired. It was a little rough, but what it did was it prompted me to reach out to a few fellow mom podcasters, a few fellow creators that I've formed relationships with, And it was a part ask for their opinion on what had transpired in the meeting. In doing this, I realized that as close as we'd become close because of the content that we share, which relates to our real lives outside of work mode, rather than a closeness because of the fact that we both create content and want it to be seen and heard by the people who want it. It opened a door that had previously been closed in those relationships. And I just want to clarify that what I'm saying here is that we formed relationships because, we talk about motherhood, we talk about marriage, we talk about our mental health, we talk about parenting. And when you get really deep with someone on an hour-long interview, and then in these cases, they then interviewed me and we did another hour, and you're talking about your hardest moments and you're like, really intimate personal life, you get close. But we never crossed over to, hey, and we're both trying to build something. We're both creating content. We both understand what it's like. We can bond over that too. And that was the door that had been opened. And I think that there in the past has been this gatekeeping narrative that is changing, but not fast enough for me. And I think that there was a gatekeeping mentality in content creation, and in some cases there might still be, because of a few reasons. In the grand scheme of things, creating content and or creating content for a living is actually relatively new, right? I mean, Instagram, for example, came out in 2010, almost 2011, which is, 13 years ago. And people certainly weren't using Instagram the way it's used now for a few years after that. So there aren't any tried and true protocols or guidelines for creators sharing information. And the other thing that comes to mind is that I think, unfortunately, the patriarchy makes it such that women are brought up to compete with each other rather than create community. Now, I absolutely know that is changing. In fact, I have yet to come in contact with a creator who abides by that since I launched my show last year. That being said, when our success is measured by the number of followers, likes, and downloads, and not simply by the quality of our content, you can see why the content creator culture started out this way. I'm by no means a social scientist. These are just my opinions based on my experience as someone who's consumed content and now creates it. The next thing that comes to mind is that there's no water cooler. When your job required you, pre-COVID, I guess, to be in an office every day for 8 hours, you build relationships faster than you might by simply liking and sharing each other's Instagram posts. And it's interesting, though, because in my case, I just talked about how I have 1 hour-long interaction with someone while I interview them, where I'm asking them these really tough personal questions, and we bond. But then I might go days, weeks, or months before interacting with that person again. So we get close because of the content and the nature of the conversation, but we don't have that day in and day out conversation that I used to have in an office. I've also formed relationships with creators who are hours, states, sometimes even countries away. So we aren't exactly meeting up for drinks and swapping stories. My point in all of this is that when I'm finding that when I'm building a relationship digitally, it either takes a lot of time to feel comfortable asking, saying, and sharing certain things, or it takes one person to break through the wall and hope the other person catches you. And at least for me, I feel like in person, I have a much better sense of how a person will respond or if I can or cannot trust them to catch me than I do, through a phone, right? And lastly, I think that when you have a platform and you know your audience, you stick to the content that works. A mommy blogger who talks about diapers and strollers isn't going to all of a sudden come on and consistently talk about creator burnout, because that's not what her audience is following her for. And don't get me wrong, we see creators all the time now sharing the tough moments, the hard times, and I appreciate it every time I see it. So while we're all out there being honest, we're being honest about the particular area of focus that is our brand, that is our message. So it's actually kind of in the nature of the work to stick to the talking points and the message and the why of what you're doing and not necessarily go down any other avenue. now that we've got that covered, creating content can feel and often is very isolating. And as much as a community as you can build, I'm going to say it again, that is still a community around the nature of your content, the context of your content, rather than the behind the scenes of creating that content. And I'm feeling this so much right now. I am feeling like I want to just bond and vent over how hard it is to have an Instagram account and have a podcast and the pressure of staying on top of it all. And so this all prompted me to start a Thursday night live series on either Instagram or TikTok, depending on who's joining me, to talk about mental health for creators. Carlie Nolan from episode 53 joined me for the first one. We were on TikTok and we talked about brand deals, the pressure to create brand content that performs well, not having genuine energy to create for sometimes hours, days, or weeks in a row, and how whenever she posts something with lackluster vibes, that it rarely does well. And this is so frustrating. So the viewer can smell your attitude through the screen, which, if you really think about it, is nuts in the sense that no one can ever always be on, right? And that is where some of the burnout comes into play, because we're trying to stay on all the time and keep up with the trends and be as engaging as possible on all of our platforms. And, I next spoke to Tara Clark from episode 3, and we talked about creator burnout at length. We also talked about content that gets copied or stolen and how to handle it. We talked about knowing and owning your lane, doing you, and forgetting the rest, despite the pressure to be on every platform all the time. And as I was writing this, it was a Thursday night, and I went live by myself to talk about just some of my recent ups and downs. And since you will hear this after that live has aired, I'll just share that some of my talking points were that the constant comparison, the always wanting more and more and more no matter where you are, and trying to enjoy and find success in where I am right now. I'm also considering making a pretty significant pivot towards mental health for creators and not being the meat and potatoes of my platforms. But of course, there's back and forth in my head about doing that. And oh my God, we can go back in our head. We can go back and forth in our heads all day. So anyway, if you're hearing this and you're a content creator, join me every Thursday night at 8:30 Eastern. We're going to talk about all the things that we're all going through: burnout, the excessive and endless pace, constant social media usage, the pressure to be, what to share, what not to share, how to handle haters, growth, lack thereof, and so much more. If you want to go live with me, send me a DM or an email, or if you just want to tune in. And I want to just say that when I say creator, I don't just mean influencer. In today's world, almost every small business owner is also a content creator, because you're having to market your product or your service on social media. And even most of the therapists I've interviewed have social media platforms to maintain and grow. And perhaps you have no interest in any of this, but like, and want to support content creators you follow or know personally. And on this series, I'm going to be talking a lot about how you can meaningfully support us. Words are hard. Okay. You'll also get a nice little peek behind the scenes of what goes on for me and some of your other favorite creators. So that's on that. Mental health for creators, for creative types, for anyone who's relating to anything I'm talking about. And I just want to share, there's no transition here. I just want to share a few things that have happened in the last week or so, because maybe they've happened to you too. And you want to hear this and go, yeah, I know, me too. And for me, it's just kind of about getting it off my chest. So if you know me and you've heard me on the show, you know that I absolutely live for the days that my kids are at school. And this week, the first day that would have come up would have been Wednesday. So when you're listening to this, it was a week ago. I could not get out of bed. in time to take my kids to school. I ended up taking my son late, and my daughter was a little bit tired and a little bit sick, and I just kept her home. And I don't know if that's hitting you as hard as it hit me, as far as, wow, I know I'm really struggling. If I'd rather have my daughter home and be in pajamas all day and watch PJ Masks than muster up the energy to get her dressed and pack her lunch and take her to school. And I took my son because he's younger and not as enticed by the TV, and he's just like a lot right now. He's in a nice little phase of 2-year-olds, and I don't have to do as much to get him off to school. But it took everything I had, I won't lie. And the next thing was later that day, I called my husband and I said, it's weird. I don't feel depressed, but I am exhibiting a lot of depressed behavior. I just was lying in bed while she was in her quiet time. I was just lying in bed staring at the ceiling and not even realize how much time had passed, and it was an hour. And not sleeping, just like staring. And I've been watching TikTok a lot more and scrolling mindlessly. I'm really having trouble falling asleep and then having a lot of trouble waking up. I've realized that I hadn't eaten all day, which was crazy. Yeah. And he was like, listen, get up right now. We need a Costco run. Go to Costco. I was like, but that'll mean I have to get dressed. He's like, I know. And I'm so grateful for that because I am in a place where I can do that. I can talk myself through that. I can say it is okay that you are going out looking less than your best. And, I know enough now to know that I will feel better after. And so we did. My daughter and I went to Costco and I did a few things. I bought pre-made food because the reason I hadn't eaten all day and honestly hadn't eaten a lot in the last couple of days is because every time I opened the fridge, the food needed to be prepared, and that was just much too much. Much too much. So buying prepared food, and I mean veggie wraps and prepared salads and things like that, really have helped me over the last few days now since that day eat. And that has helped a lot. Eating has helped a lot. And, I did feel better. I felt accomplished after. I felt like I got something done for the house that we needed, and my daughter and I got out and we had a slice of pizza and it was good. And, yeah. The other thing I'm finding is that I'm finding myself like completely zoning out at times, having absolutely no motivation to do work. I don't know how I'm doing this now, to be honest with you. I truly don't. It's just like by some miracle I am recording this. And I've got and this first time I ever seen this, I saw a TikTok where someone was talking about how a sign of anxiety is like biting the inside of your mouth, and I do that constantly. Like I do it till I bleed sometimes, and I don't even realize it's happening. And then when I realize it's happening, I can't stop, and it is wild. But that's what's going on. So anyway, I don't really know how I'm going to sum this up. I don't know that I have a nice bow to wrap around it. All I know is that I'm struggling recently, and by the time you hear this, I could be a totally different person, and I'll want to delete this from the world. But, I'm having trouble, and I'm much better off. Like that, I think that's the hard thing, right? It's like I know where I was at a year ago, and I'm so far from there. But it's still hard sometimes, and kind of just maybe getting this back on track is that I'm so grateful for times like this when I don't have to get up and put a black suit on and go into an office and deal with clients, because that was my old life. I'm so grateful that that is not my life when I'm struggling like this. On the other hand, because I am the only pusher of the work that I do now, when I do feel like this, I don't get a lot done and I don't feel good about it. And so on one hand, it's super nice to not have to be forced into a situation that would probably make it worse. On the other hand, I feel like I don't like feeling like I've now had 2 weeks of not pushing the needle forward in this, whether it's social media or my podcast or my brand or any of the other things I have going on. So anyway, that's it. All right. I think we've heard enough. I appreciate you listening. And I don't know. At the time of I'm recording this, I may have another one coming for you on Friday, or I may get it together and edit an interview. We'll see. What I would appreciate is if you like my show and you like what you're hearing, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Write a review. This really helps other people find the show. And if you're on social media, you like this episode, you liked another episode, comment on a post or share it to your stories or DM me or whatever, because, there's no shame in this game. I am doing all of this to help. I am doing all of this to give a voice to things that I don't feel like are talked about enough. I am doing this for myself because I learn and grow every time I have an interview or go on social media and have an interaction with someone. But I'm also doing this wanting feedback. I'm wanting to hear from you. I'm wanting to know what you're liking, what you're not liking, what you want more of. I want to really start to cultivate a deeper connection to those of you who are listening. So please reach out. I will never think it is weird. I will never think it is corny. I will never think it is like, I don't know. I just will never think it's weird. I will always love it, whatever it is that you have to say or that you think about what's going on here. I always think it's cool that you took the time. So, okay, I'm really done now. That's it. I'll see ya when I see ya. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.